Okay, so for this teaching worksheet, okay, for the first section, we are focusing on fractional equation. So fractional equations are equations that you will see fractions. So because of the fact that it contains fraction, it will create quite a bit of algebra. So some of the fraction thing that we learn in Sec 1, Sec 2 will be sometimes you will have cross multiplication. Sometimes you need to make same denominator. So sometimes you will need to cross multiply. Sometimes you need to have same denominator, then cross multiply. So that's what happened during Sec 1 and Sec 2. So in Sec 1 and Sec 2, you have encountered cross multiply, you encounter same denominator and cross multiply. So in this Sec 3 fractional equation, you're actually doing the same technique, except that it will get reduced to quadratic equation. So you will end up with quadratic equations, which means that you can go on for your quadratic formula. So you can always use the quadratic formula. Of course, you can use your factorization, but not all the time factorization can work. So sometimes we might as well straight away use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to show you some examples. Okay, so for the first one here, 1a. 1a is a typical one where I will do a cross multiplication. So to me, it's x plus 1 over 1, 4 over x, and then I will do my cross multiplication. So when I get to the cross multiplication, I end up as a quadratic. So when I end up as a quadratic and I'm trying to use the formula, I'm going to do my comparison. I'm going to do my comparison. A is equal to 1. B is equal to 2. C is equal to minus 4. And I'm going to use my ABC and input into my quadratic formula. So I will not be showing you the input into the quadratic formula. So I like you to try from here and see that you actually get the two answers here. So remember I mentioned that if you want to minimize mistake, you should input calculator partially bit by bit. So I will start off with this portion first. Okay, so I will start off with this portion. And in this case, this portion is going to give me a 20. Then from there, you press out the two answers. So that is the cross multiplication idea. So the cross multiplication leads you to a quadratic, and you in turn you use a quadratic formula. So in the next one, you see a fraction plus fraction. So in the situation of a fraction plus fraction, okay, we got two fractions. You need to combine them. You need to make same denominator. However, in this case, right, you actually need to factorize first. So if you look at the two denominator, the x squared minus 4 is factorizable. So you got to apply your factorization that you have learned in Sec 2. So don't blindly make it into a single fraction first. So you got to factorize. After you factorize, you look at the two denominator. You realize that this one is missing out on a bracket. So this one is missing out on x plus 2. So I'm going to make same denominator, which enable me to add the numerator. So you need to make same denominator, but the make same denominator comes after the factorization. And then, okay, I'm going to do the cross multiplication again. But before I do the cross multiplication again, I think I got to simplify properly first. So I'm going to simplify properly so that my cross multiplication will not be too complex. So I'm adding up the two fractions. The only way to add up will be to make sure the denominator is the same first. So that is the challenging part. Then after that, you do your cross multiplication. So as you are doing this cross multiplication, it should lead you back to a quadratic format. And if you see the quadratic format, again, you try to get your A, you try to get your B, and you try to get your C. Okay, and then you apply it into your formula. So go and work it out and see that you can get the two answers. Okay, give it a try. So that will be the idea for fractional equation. Okay, so we still got a bit more idea in example 2. So in example 2, it's the same thing. If you look at 2a, we are adding fraction, and you look at the denominator. Both the denominator is not quadratic. So if it's not quadratic, what you can do is you multiply the missing bracket. So you multiply the missing bracket. Both of them should end up having same denominator. Okay, so you multiply the missing brackets. So with the same denominator, you can add the numerator. So it will be 8 plus this, and the denominator we have gotten. And we are kind of ready for the cross multiply. Okay, but before we cross multiply, we simplify first. So there's a lot of algebra involved. That's why sometimes in this question, this type of question, it can cost as much as 5 marks. So if you look right, I'm like doing a lot of steps before it even leads me to the cross multiplication. Okay, so make sure you got no careless first. I'm also worried. Then you do the cross multiplication. So as you see, there's a lot of algebra involved. And is it easy to make careless mistake? Yes. Okay, make sure you simplify until you get a quadratic where you can get your A, B, C. to get your ABC. And then you try to apply it into the quadratic formula. Okay, so this part, I'm going to leave it to you. You give it a try. See whether you can obtain the two answers. But you realize it get longer and longer. So before you need to do so much before you can even get to cross multiply. Then after that, eventually you get a quadratic and you still need to apply the huge formula. Okay, so the same thing is going to happen for the next one. You see a fraction minus a fraction. So same thing, I'm going to multiply the missing bracket. So I'm going to multiply the missing brackets. Okay, you realize I ignore the other fraction first. I focus on the fraction minus fraction. So I would like the denominator to be the same. So I can subtract. So right now I can subtract the numerator. So with the same denominator, I can subtract. Okay, so before you go on for your cross multiplication, okay, make sure you simplify first. Okay, make sure there's no careless mistake. Okay, so if there's nothing to simplify, then you are ready for the cross multiplication. But the cross multiplication, you have a bracket multiplied by another bracket. So you realize that even after the cross multiplication, you got to be expanding this kind of brackets. So there's quite a lot of simplification if you realize. And then everything you got to bring it over. So you bring the minus 5x squared over. You bring the plus 5 over until you get a 0. So eventually, you can get your ABC for the formula. So I'm running out of space here. So once you get your ABC, you start to put it into your formula. So you give it a try, see whether you gotten the two answers. Okay, so let me just do a quick check. Okay. Okay, just to make sure that I got no careless mistake. Two x squared. Okay. So let me know whether you obtain the answer. So if there's any answer discrepancy, you let me know. But if you look at the approach is very repetitive. It's just that while you are doing all this, everything is subjectable to careless mistake. You got a lot of chance to make careless mistake. So you got to be very aware. Okay, which are the area that you will always make careless mistake? Do you make mistake in the ABC, in the quadratic formula, or do you make mistake in making same denominator, or do you make mistake in cross multiplication? So there's a lot of layers of work that you got to work on. So give it a try, see whether you can get the answer for these few first before you try questions on your own. So when you try questions on your own, right, I have already prepared the questions in such a way that it will be simpler and then slowly it will get more complex. Okay, so we give it a try. So make sure your example 1 and example 2, you can get all the answers first.